welcome to episode number 58 of the Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast, presented by Fox, PHL The Gambler, 102.5 FM, 1480 AM, and iHeartRadio. My name is Jason Fanelli, and I am the Esports and Gaming Insider for Fox, PHL The Gambler, and I gotta be honest with you, it has been very difficult to be a gaming journalist in the last couple of weeks. There's a big story that has come out of California that we will get to in the second segment here. If you've been listening to me on Sean Brace, we will talk about what we talked about there as well, get into some of the nitty-gritty as to why it is so heinous and so gross and what you can do to support the people that have been affected by this. We will also talk about the Overwatch League and the Philadelphia Fusion, despite, the company that made the game being the one under fire, but got to cover the team, I suppose. They didn't do it yet, so we'll just we'll keep on keeping on there. And then finally, on a lighter note, we'll get out of here with some talk about the Olympics and where esports might fit in with those in the near future. But before we do any of that at all, it is time for the 6 in 60 seconds. Your Philadelphia Fusion play 2 matches to begin the final regular season tournament of the year, the Countdown Cup, this Saturday 8 a.m. versus Shanghai and Sunday at 8 a.m. versus Hangzhou. The Call of Duty League returns to fans with the Stave 5 Major this weekend. The tournament begins Thursday, but the first live matches with fans begin Saturday. The Street Fighter V Summer Update is scheduled for this Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, with an hour-long presentation that will dive into Oro, Akira, and potentially the 5th and final character. Elsewhere, the PlayStation 5 becomes Sony's fastest-selling console ever, and by proxy, the fastest-selling console in video gaming history, with 10 million units sold worldwide, while Xbox also announces that its Series X and S are the fastest-selling in Xbox history. More details on the Activision Blizzard lawsuit have come to light, including a full expose from Kotaku on the so-called Cosby Suite. We'll get to that. And finally, video game music featured heavily in the Olympic opening ceremonies last week, including musics from Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, Monster Hunter, and Soul Calibur. Those are your 6 in 60 seconds. And as always, the 6 in 60 seconds is brought to you by our sponsor here at Cheesesteaks and Controllers, Ghost Shaver. The Ghost Shaver is designed to feel like it's an extension of your arm, allowing the user to reach anywhere on the head, face, or body. The precision cutting system gives you a close and smooth shave every single time, with 5 different rotary flex action super thin blades and a patented handheld design that fits right into the palm of your hand. Go to ghostshaver.com to check it out and get yours. That's Ghost Shaver, a shave above the rest. Yes, folks, those are the 6 in 60 seconds for the week. Kind of tipped my hand as to what we're going to be talking about later on in the show. Regarding Activision Blizzard, we will get to all of that in the second segment of the show. It is not easy to listen to, I will warn you now, but it is worth talking about for many, many reasons, which we will get into. So, before we get into that, let's talk about the Overwatch League. The Philadelphia Fusion have their final chance to make some headway before the season playoffs begin. The Countdown Cup is upon us. The last 3 weeks of qualifying matches are here. And the Fusion find themselves in a precarious position in the Eastern Division. The way that the playoff structure works is that the top 2 teams from the East will get in, and the other teams will play for that third and final spot. Right now, the Fusion sit at 3 with a chance, depending on how they do this weekend, to move into that second spot and get into the playoffs by proxy, which I would prefer, of course, but we will have to see how things shake out. Am I confident about such things? No, I cannot say that I am, especially when their first match on Saturday at 8 a.m. is against the Shanghai Dragons, who have won 2 of the 3 in-season tournaments this year and were second place in the one that they lost. So that team is flying high, very, very tough to beat. And that is who the Fusion see first in these Countdown Cup qualifiers Saturday at 8 a.m. If you're listening to this on the radio at 4 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, that match has already happened. Go check out the results. I hope it's a good one. I hope we can celebrate a win against the Shanghai Dragons, but I would not hold my breath on that. I did want to get into a little bit of the schedule as to what's happening this week. In the Overwatch League, give my picks for the teams that I think will be moving on with wins here in the first weeks of qualifying. There are some pretty good matches to talk about. There's one in particular right on Friday that already has my interest, that could be a very, very big Western Division matchup right from this jump. So let's get into the Dallas Fuel versus the Paris Eternal. This is not the match I'm talking about, but still a pretty decent match. Paris finds itself in the top half of the Western Division, and Dallas is the perennial Western Division powerhouse, having made all three of the finals of the in-season tournaments that have happened so far. They find themselves at number 1 in the West, with Paris looking at number 8, so not quite on top. I apologize for that. Dallas is going to beat Paris. I think they're going to beat them pretty handily. 3-1 is what I will put it at. Would not be surprised if it's a full 3-0, but picking sweeps is very difficult in this league. So I am going with 3-1 Dallas in the first match of the weekend. Then we have the Houston Outlaws and the Washington Justice, another interesting Western matchup in that both of these teams find themselves in the top 5 of the of the West. Houston at 3, Washington at 5, and the space between those two teams is so precarious. Anything really could happen in the top 6 of the Western Division. It is anybody's ball game really outside of the Dallas Fuel and their 15 points. Second through 6th either have 9 or 8 points, and then 7, 8, and 9 have 6 points. So unless you're the London Spitfire and the Vancouver Titans with 0 points, you are still very much in contention, even if it's a small contention, for the playoffs on the Western side to be one of those 5 teams that gets in. As for this match, though, Houston and Washington, I think Washington has a little bit more to play for, so they're going to come out on top here. It will be a close one. It will be a tough one. I put it at 3-2 for Washington, just because they're fighting from behind, and Houston has been very, very inconsistent so far in this Overwatch League season. So give me Washington over Houston there. Saturday morning, 5 a.m., we have the Hangzhou Spark taking on the Seoul Dynasty. And as always, I don't think the Seoul's going to have any issues with Hangzhou. Not that Hangzhou is necessarily very bad. They're actually doing pretty good over there. They hold the 5th spot in the East. One of the play-in cutoff teams, along with Philadelphia and Cheongdao, whereas Seoul is sitting pretty at number 2 and wants to hold that position so they stay in the playoffs. I'm going to go 3-1 Seoul over Hangzhou in that one. Next up, we're talking about the 2 of the bottom teams in the East, the New York Excelsior and the LA Valiant. The LA Valiant have not won a single match this year and have only won 2 maps in 39 tries. I do not see that streak ending here. Give me the New York Excelsior with a convincing 3-0 victory. There's my sweep. That's a sweep I am willing to call. 3-0 for the New York Excelsior. And then we talk about Philadelphia at Shanghai. I gave my thoughts about this in the very beginning of the segment here. I do not like Philadelphia's chances, but they have surprised me before. I would hope that they would play this team a little bit harder than they did last time they played them. I think they went out 3-0, if not 3-1. I do see a repeat performance here, too. I want to go 3-1 Shanghai once again. I would love to be wrong. I would love for them to prove me wrong, but I do not see that happening. On the Western side on Saturday, we're looking at Boston at Paris. Boston can't decide if it wants to be the best team in the league or the worst team in the league. Did a pretty decent job moving up in the standings in the countdown, in the summer showdown, getting out of the basement and heading to 7th to make the postseason play-in cutoff, taking the top 9 from the West for the cutoff there. Here they are looking at a Paris Eternal team that, if my predictions are correct, will have just lost to Dallas and is looking for revenge. Honestly, I don't think they get that revenge here. I think Boston will make Paris 0-2 to start the Countdown Cup. Moving on now to the next match in the West, Saturday at 4:30. So if you're listening to this on the radio, this is the next match that you'll be able to see. That is the Atlanta Reign and the LA Gladiators. LA at 4 in the standings, Atlanta at 6. This one could really go either way. These 2 teams are very, very evenly matched. In fact, they have the same amount of points, 8, and the same map differential, plus 13 throughout the season. The only reason that the Reign are 6th and the LA Gladiators are 4th is that LA is 8-4 to Atlanta's 7-5. Atlanta has made a couple tournaments and had a couple tournament wins to gain that extra point. I do think LA takes care of business here and stays in the top 4. I do not think Atlanta could really get over that hump. I could be wrong. No, this is going to be a 3-2 match either way, but I am taking LA in this one. Saturday night, we have a marquee matchup. The top 2 teams in the West face off, Dallas and San Francisco. It's been a weird year for San Francisco. They're really can't decide which side of the coin they want to be on. Do they want to be the 2-time defending champions and defend that crown properly, or do they not want to make a single end of qualifiers Final Four in this season? Or they might have made the first one, but they haven't won one yet, and they haven't made the last 2. So if they're going to move further in this tournament and keep that second seed in that guaranteed playoff spot, they better start doing things now. I think Dallas might have their number, though, and I don't think it starts here. I am going to go 3-2 Dallas on Saturday night. I have a feeling this one's going to bite me in the butt, but that's where I'm going. So Dallas goes 2-0 in the first week of the qualifiers, and San Francisco loses to Dallas again. Sunday morning, 5 a.m., again, we have Seoul and LA Valiant. I am not going to waste my time trying to analyze this because the LA Valiant, as I said before, are terrible, and Seoul are not, so we're going to go with Seoul and an easy win there. The Shanghai Dragons, New York Excelsior is next, and I do think Shanghai takes care of business against New York as well. Another 2-0 start in the Countdown Cup for the Shanghai Dragons. And finally, at 8 a.m. on Sunday, it's your team, Philadelphia Fusion, taking on the Hangzhou Spark. And this one, I'm a little more confident in Philadelphia's chances, but this is also the kind of game that they could drop out of nowhere. I do have enough confidence, though, to predict a 3-1 victory for the Fusion over Hangzhou, because they've played Hangzhou very tough and come out on top, I think, every time they've played them so far. I may be forgetting one match. But Fusion, I have going 1-1 in the first weekend of play. And as I said to Sean Brace on the radio, I think they'll actually come out with a -1 map differential. And by that, I mean, I think they're going to get swept by Shanghai and win here 3-1. So they win 3 maps, lose 4, and come out -1 in the map differential for the first week. Sunday in the West, we have 3 more matchups, again starting at 3 o'clock. First, Atlanta and Houston, both coming off of losses earlier in the weekend, if my predictions are correct. I do think that Houston recovers and beats Atlanta to send Atlanta to 0-2. This one, though, if there is a match that I'm more confident in Atlanta winning, it's this one, just because Houston, again, is so streaky and so unpredictable, and Atlanta has qualified for at least 1 tournament, maybe 2 of the Final Fours so far this season, so they may be coming in with a little more confidence, a little more to prove, but I am going to go with Houston in this one, 3-1. San Francisco and Boston next at 4:30, and I really don't have any problem predicting San Francisco to take this one handily. 3-0, perhaps 3-1, or perhaps 3-0, I should say. San Francisco beating up on Boston. And the final match of the first weekend of the Countdown Cup is the LA Gladiators and the Washington Justice at 6 p.m. on Saturday. The 4th and 5th teams in the standings, as it is right now. Same record, same amount of points, a +4 map differential advantage for the LA Gladiators, hence the tiebreaker to put LA in 4th. I do think that LA wins this one as well. It's going to be a tough 3-2 victory here for them, which will send the Justice into a 1-1 record for the first weekend with a 0 map differential. And LA Gladiators sitting pretty at 2-0 with a +5 or +3 it would be, because 3-1 against Atlanta and 3-2 against Washington. So just running down those picks for week 1 again, we have Dallas, Washington, Seoul Dynasty, New York over LA Valiant, Shanghai over the Fusion, New York Excelsior, that's a rerun, of course, we already talked about that. We have Boston beating Paris, we have LA beating Atlanta, Dallas beating San Francisco, Seoul beating LA on Sunday, Shanghai beating New York on Sunday, Philadelphia beating Hangzhou on Sunday, Houston over Atlanta, San Francisco over Boston, and LA over Washington. Another good week coming up here. The final weeks of the Overwatch League are upon us. slowly but surely getting to that September 25th final out there in Los Angeles. Would love to get out there for it, but I'm really not confident in the Fusion getting there. And without the Fusion there, I would just be sitting around and watching. As much fun as I would have, but the Fusion are going to be the team that really entices me to get out there, should they make it to the Galen Center. But there is your Countdown Cup week one predictions. If you have a place that you can bet on them, go for it. If not, just keep tabs on me and tell me how wrong I am as the weekend progresses. Okay, moving on now to the second topic of the evening, and unfortunately, I got to get heavy on you folks. This one's going to be a rough one. But before I do that, I do want to address one thing. Usually, I do an on tap segment where I talk about the things that are coming out in this coming week. I completely forgot to do one last week, and it was a doozy of a week with Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, Neo: The World Ends With You, Tribes of Midgard, and more. I feel like a bit of a doofus. So go and check out the games that came out last week. There are a lot of good ones worth mentioning that I just, for whatever reason, didn't do it. So go check out and see if there's anything that you are looking into. I personally am into Great Ace Attorney and Neo: The World Ends With You. Very much looking forward to sit down and tearing those games apart. Now, going to the second topic of the evening, we need to talk about Activision Blizzard. Now, for those who don't know who Activision Blizzard are, who listen to this show on the radio and aren't familiar with video games, or if you're my parents, no offense to my parents, Activision Blizzard is a giant video game corporation, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in the industry. The Activision half has been around forever and has even back in the old days of gaming, the Atari days of gaming. Their current biggest franchises include Call of Duty. They were the ones that redid the Tony Hawk franchise there. They have Crash Bandicoot under their wing, so on and so forth. A couple other decent franchises there. While Blizzard was a primarily PC developer, has also been around for ages. And they have developed games like Diablo and StarCraft and Overwatch and Hearthstone and World of Warcraft and stuff like that. So last Wednesday, I believe it was the 21st. So yes, Wednesday of last week, a lawsuit was officially filed in California court by the state of California, specifically the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing, suing Activision Blizzard for what they called a, quote, frat boy workplace culture. The California Department of Fair Employment and Housing is alleging that it has led to years of harassment and abuse targeting women and marginalized genders in the workforce. Now, I am going to talk about some of the details in this suit. I would like to warn you, put a quick content warning out there. There are some things in there that are pretty gross. I am not going to get into deliberate specifics. I'm going to try and report these things as clearly and as cleanly as I can, so as not to, I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. But these are examples provided in the lawsuit by the state of California when they were talking about the frat boy culture. One of the big parts of this was called cube crawls, where male employees would bring a ton of alcohol to the office and basically hold their own bar crawl in the cubicles of the office. And then whenever they got to female employees, would do inappropriate things, as you can imagine. Which, that sounds gross to begin with, but that's just, tip of the iceberg here. It's alleged that male employees were going into work hungover, playing video games for long periods of time during work while delegating their responsibilities and development to female employees, engaging in banter of a private nature, let's say, talk openly about female anatomy, and joke about things that should not be joked about. Female employees were subjected to constant harassment, including having to fend off unwanted advances, and also inappropriate physical contact at the cube crawls and other company events. It's just an absolute laundry list of awful, awful things. And that is just the harassment part. Let's talk about another portion of this. And this one gets me, because if this had happened wherever my wife had worked when she was in this state, I would have gone in there and turned some desks over. So supervisors ignored medical restrictions given to female employees and gave them negative evaluations because they were on maternity leave. Other female employees reported that they were criticized for leaving to pick up their children from daycare while their male counterparts were playing games in the office, and that female employees were kicked out of rooms designated for pumping, lactation rooms, so employees could use them for meetings. This is awful. Flat out terrible. Awful, awful allegations and descriptions in this lawsuit against Activision Blizzard. And I cannot imagine, obviously we won't know until the hearings and the trials and everything are over. It sounds like there's a lot of truth to these. Like as the reports came out, and employees and former employees came out and corroborated a lot of these things, talked about as much as they could without getting themselves in trouble, because of course when you leave Activision Blizzard you have to sign a gag order. Essentially it's a non-disclosure agreement for the rest of your life, saying that you can't talk about things that you did there or that happened to you there, because of course they have those things. Why wouldn't they? He says sarcastically. But these are the kind of things that were happening for years, decades even. And I know this because one of the things that was mentioned in the report, in the lawsuit, was detailed upon in an expose over at Kotaku.com. Fine piece of journalism by Ethan Gatch about the developers of Blizzard's infamous Cosby suite. Now, I'd mentioned this when I talked to Sean Brace on the radio on Thursday on the Daily Ticket, to Google Cosby suite and what that could possibly be in relation to Activision Blizzard. And unfortunately, the answer is very uncomfortable. It's not something that I really want to, deep in my soul, I don't want to have to talk about this because it should never have happened. I should be talking about things like how my prediction of Kenny Omega coming to Street Fighter V could be coming true on Tuesday in that Street Fighter V live stream that I mentioned. Or I could be talking about how the Olympics just had its huge showcase for opening ceremonies, and video game music was included all the time. I put that in the 6 and 60 seconds. I could have devoted an entire segment to it. We are going to have an Olympics segment, but not about that. Those are the things I want to talk about. But I feel like on this podcast, on this platform, I have to make sure that my audience, who I think, being on Philly Sports Radio, are some gamers, but also people who may not be necessarily familiar with the video game industry and the people and the companies that are in it. And because of that, I have an opportunity to bring this stuff to an audience who may not hear it otherwise. Granted, this was covered on things like CNN and other big news outlets, but I don't know how many of them got into the nitty-gritty like this Kotaku piece did. And if you're not a gamer, if you don't play games, if you're not a gaming fan, you don't know what a Kotaku is, let alone that it's a news website for video games. So that's why I'm talking about this. I'm talking about it for attention, not for my own attention, for it to get attention. I'm talking about it to bring vision to it, to bring eyes to it, to bring ears to it, to bring, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is. This is just, I am but one, well, we'll get into that. We'll get into that, why I'm talking about this at the end. But first, the Cosby Suite. Now, this Cosby Suite was essentially a private room, a private suite in a hotel at BlizzCon, Blizzard convention. Every year, Blizzard would host its own convention to give its own updates on its own games, from StarCraft and World of Warcraft and stuff we talked about earlier. Overwatch, for example, was first revealed at BlizzCon in 2014, I want to say it was. Might have been 2013. I'm pretty sure it was 2014. Those are the kind of things that Blizzard did. They would have a weekend of LAN events and live tournaments and meet and greets and panels and stuff like that. Basically just the BlizzCon, Blizzard convention, as it sounds. But a couple of guys, including one of the essential developers, one of the core developers of World of Warcraft, got together and put in for a massive hotel suite. They would load that hotel suite with more alcohol than should be allowed. And it was the place where they would bring female attendees or employees or what have you to, I don't really need to fill in the lines here, I don't think. The reason it was called the Cosby Suite was because they felt it necessary to hang a giant portrait of Bill Cosby on the wall as some sort of joke. Now, they tried to cover it up as the joke being that the floor of the hotel room or of the hallway or the lobby or whatever the heck floor they were talking about looked like a Bill Cosby sweater. So they bought a picture for the Cosby Suite. That is obviously nonsense. 2013, when this is alleged to have happened, was when the first allegations were coming out against Bill Cosby. So there is a potential link there that they just don't want to get into. But, so getting into a little bit more of this. So one of the people who was alleged to be doing this, in fact, one of the few specifically mentioned in the lawsuit by California, was a man named, I'm going to butcher this last name, Alex Afrasiabi, I think is it. Afrasiab, I'm not exactly sure how to say it. He is the core World of Warcraft developer, quest designer, had his own non-playable character that you could get quests from in World of Warcraft. That's how deep into this game he was. His room was the Cosby Suite room. And he was one of the people who would, bring women up there. He would hit on them. He would tell them all he wanted to marry them. He would attempt to kiss them. He'd put his arms around them in plain view of other people, including supervisors who had to intervene. Or in one picture, the picture that was on the Kotaku article, as somebody who used to work at Activision mentioned, and this is probably the part that made my blood boil the most, in this picture in front of Bill Cosby in this suite with this guy are members of Activision Blizzard's HR team. Human resources in the picture, in the suite with this guy. That right there is evidence of top-down rot. Top-down, just not good, everything bad, needs to be completely gutted and started over nonsense inside Blizzard. And it's awful, and it's deplorable. There's words, I can't even come up with the words to describe how angry this makes me. And I am just some dude recording in my basement across the country from where this studio actually is. I cannot fathom the anger, sadness, rage of the people that this happened to, and the details coming out about this stuff, just ripping off those old wounds, or God forbid any new wounds, if it's still happening to this day. It just makes me sick. And what also makes me sick is that the response from Activision Blizzard's top people, like Bobby Kotick and Francis Townsend, who is their new chief compliance officer, put out some statements that were not only terrible, they resulted in over 2,000 former and current Activision Blizzard employees signing a letter condemning the company's response. So I have pieces of the letter right here, as to what the response was. This Francis Townsend, the chief compliance officer, called the lawsuit meritless and gave this whole rebuke about how it's not true and California's just trying to do political stuff. They think stuff like that. When clearly there is enough corroborating evidence to suggest something was going on. The fact that this was a 2-year investigation tells me that something was happening. And then Bobby Kotick, who is the famous CEO of Activision Blizzard and one of the most highly paid people in the industry, and just a not the best human being in the world. Let's put it that way. Came out and put out a statement through his investors, which tells you exactly where his head is, because the stock started plummeting. But anyway, here is the letter that was sent to managers about the statement. And I'm going to read it in full. To the leaders of Activision Blizzard, we, the undersigned, agree that the statements from Activision Blizzard Incorporated and their legal counsel regarding the DFEH lawsuit, as well as the subsequent internal statement from Francis Townsend, are abhorrent and insulting to all that we believe our company should stand for. To put it clearly and unequivocally, our values as employees are not accurately reflected in the words and actions of our leadership. We believe these statements have damaged our ongoing quest for equality inside and outside of our industry. Categorizing the claims that have been made as distorted and in many cases false creates a company atmosphere that disbelieves victims. It also casts doubt on our organization's ability to hold abusers accountable for their actions and foster a safe environment for victims to come forward in the future. These statements make it clear that our leadership is not putting our values first. Immediate corrections are needed from the highest levels of our organization. Our company executives have claimed that actions will be taken to protect us, but in the face of legal action and the troubling official responses that followed, we no longer trust that our leaders will place employee safety above their own interests. To claim that this is a truly meritless and irresponsible lawsuit while seeing so many current and former employees speak out about their own experiences regarding harassment and abuse is simply unacceptable. We call for official statements that recognize the seriousness of these allegations and demonstrate compassion for victims of harassment and assault. We call on Francis Townsend to stand by her word to step down as the executive sponsor of the ABK Employee Women's Network as a result of the damaging nature of her statement. We call on the executive leadership team to work with us on new and meaningful efforts that ensure employees as well as our community have a safe place to speak out and come forward. We stand with all our friends, teammates, and colleagues, as well as the members of our dedicated community who have experienced mistreatment or harassment of any kind. We will not be silenced, we will not stand aside, and we will not give up until the company we love is a workplace we can all feel proud to be part of again. We will be the change. Now, this letter went out on Monday, and since then they had a Activision Blizzard walkout where both virtually, for those working from home, and in studio, a great majority of people, a lot of people, I'd say over 150, 200 people, walked out, stood outside of Blizzard headquarters and picketed and chanted and protested not only the actions laid out in the suit, but also the responses from Francis Townsend and Bobby Kotick and so on and so forth. But also, as good as not good, but as troubling as this whole situation is, there has been some good to come out of it. First of all, that all these people are finding their voice and are being able to protest like this is wonderful. There's also been a great showing of kindness from throughout the gaming industry towards these people, in support of them, from people, going on social media and showing their support, or to the studio that makes Ashes of Creation, Intrepid Studios, sent a food truck fully paid to the walkout yesterday or Wednesday, so that the people that were walking out could have something to eat, get a drink, cool off in the warm California weather, without anybody asking them to. Just Intrepid Studios sent that food truck. Major props to them. That's an amazing thing to do. Ashes of Creation, go play it to support them. It has not been a great story. It has not been a good story. It has been an awful, awful, awful story. But maybe this is one of the times, and I say this with all of the bated breath in the entire world, maybe this is finally the time where things stick. Maybe this is the one where people say, you know what? This doesn't deserve to happen anymore. Studios that do this, studios that make their employees feel this way, studios that abuse and harass people just for wanting to work at a video game company, we don't have to put up with this crap anymore. And maybe this will be the time for real change. It has already started to show a little bit of a ripple effect. Ubisoft, which has already been plagued with its own harassment going back to last year, its own harassment issues, had some of their employees write a letter of intent to the leadership as well, saying, hey, you're not doing good enough, we need to keep fixing this, in solidarity with the Activision Blizzard folks. So that there might be a new chapter in that saga. Who God knows what other companies are going to be folded into this or included in this as the weeks and months go on. I've read stories about all kinds of different places where things like this were happening. I read a story about a manager at the marketing group at Nintendo who was just an absolute awful human being to one of his employees. It's not been good. It's not been good. Not only as someone who, covers video games, it's been a tough cover reading these things and and I'm a spectator. I'm an outsider when it comes to these things. None of these things directly happen to me, but it's still just so awful. It creates that pit in your stomach of anger and hatred and whatever else you want to call it. But also as a gamer, as a player of an enjoyer of video games, as someone who has grown up loving this medium and everything it has to offer, this is embarrassing that Ubisoft and Activision Blizzard, two of the leading brands in our industry, are doing such awful things to their employees and allowing it to happen. At least, I have to say allegedly, but there is a lot of smoke coming from this fire. And I am imagining that there is some truth to some of the allegations that are being thrown towards these companies. They'll come out in due time, whether legally or not. And by that I mean through the legal system or through other means. But as you can hear in my voice, I'm getting a little parched just from how angry this is making me. But this cannot happen. This cannot go on anymore. And I'm just a freelance journalist who happens to have a radio show to talk to you about this. It's awful. No one deserves this in their workplace. They just want to go to work and make video games. There's nothing wrong with that. And these people seem to think that they have all this power because, hey, they're leadership in a successful video game company and they can do whatever the heck they want. No, you can't. And it's about damn time you people learn that you can't do it. A reckoning is coming. I feel it in my bones. I hope I'm right. But this feels like it could finally be the harbinger, the change that this industry desperately needs to knock off this nonsense and become the respected and inclusive industry that we all know it can be. I stand with Activision Blizzard. I support their walkout yesterday 100%, and I support anything that they need to do to right this ship and make right the wrongs that have been done to their employees for years now. And I hope that by listening to this and reading into it and hearing all of the things that have happened, you will feel the same. All right, now that we've covered the heavy topic, and I hope that you do your research and you learn from this. Honestly, if John Oliver happens to listen to this and he wanted to do one of his trademark 20-minute pieces on Activision Blizzard in this lawsuit, he can go right ahead. That would be great, because the more exposure that this gets, the better for this industry. But let's talk about something fun, huh? Let's talk about something fun to get us out of here on this episode 58 of Cheesesteaks and Controllers. Let's talk about the Olympics. So the Olympics on Friday, was it Friday? Was it Monday? What exactly when it was? I don't remember exactly what it was. They threw me a little curveball in the opening ceremonies. Apparently, due to some behind-the-scenes nonsense with people that were making the show, and the show had to be changed at the last minute. Whatever happened, it ended up that the teams that are involved in the Tokyo Olympics right now all walked out to video game music. Some of the most classic video game tracks of all time. Frog's theme from Chrono Trigger, the Final Fantasy VII main theme, all kinds of great music. The list is floating around somewhere online. I know I retweeted it. It's out there somewhere. Things from like Nier and Monster Hunter and Tales series, which makes John Jansen very happy. And the fact that I mentioned the Tales series will make him happy regardless. But just really cool to hear that music played in that context, giving an air of legitimacy. Not that I didn't know it was already legitimate, but giving an extra air of legitimacy to video game music through the Olympics was just a very, very cool thing. But then it led to another discussion that I've had with a couple of people, including Sean Brace on the Daily Ticket on Thursday, the 29th of July. What about esports in the Olympics? Would esports fit in the Olympics? Would esports be suitable for the Olympics? And to that I say yes, absolutely they would. And as I mentioned with Sean Brace, you can go listen to my interview with him on the Daily Ticket from July 29, so I can dig a little deeper into this. That yes, obviously video games and regular sports do not have the same physical requirements to be successful. You don't have to work out every day. You don't have to, not like they do, not like a professional athlete does. You don't have to, twist and turn your body as a gymnast or run until you can't run anymore, build your endurance as a soccer player, or it's not an Olympic sport, but in professional football, go out and be the strongest and the biggest that you can so you can catch passes or tackle people, that stuff. Obviously, video gamers don't need that. But they do need mental endurance, because putting in the time to get good at games and good enough for competition and learning all the ins and outs, that takes time and effort. A lot of time sitting in front of a screen, a lot of time dedicated, hours upon hours upon hours dedicated to learning the intricacies of the game they want to get good at. If it's a fighting game, learning that particular character and how it matches up with every other character in the game. It's a lot of research, a lot of work, so the mental strain is there. And there is a physical strain. It's just not the same. Instead of, full body workouts and tearing your ACLs and stuff like that, you got to worry about wrist health, finger health, hand health, arm health. You got to worry about, your neck sitting in a chair like that all day. You got to get up and stretch around. You feel it in your spine. You might start compressing some discs. There are things that can happen. And again, I will not sit here and tell you that they are as serious as what can befall a professional athlete. It's not. But it's still there. It's still a lot of work. It's still a lot of time. It's still a lot of effort. It's still worthy of the Olympics. And for this discussion, I have prepared 5 games that I think would be perfect for the Olympics. Perfect introductions for esports in the Olympics as soon as 2024, if I had my way. And the first one is Rocket League. Now, if you've never played Rocket League is basically soccer, but instead of traditional soccer where you're playing with people on a pitch, you are moving around a giant gray metallic ball into giant goals, and your players are cars, boosts, hot rods, big muscle cars. That's what you're playing with in Rocket League, and has become one of the premier esports out there right now. The RLCS, Rocket League Championship Series, is very successful. Lots of teams are getting into the Rocket League scene as it continues to grow. In fact, in July of 2020, if the Olympics had gone off without a pandemic, if the pandemic had never happened, in that alternate timeline we all think about every single day, the Intel World Open was going to happen adjacent to the Olympics, an Olympic-sponsored event, but not an Olympic event, that would have had Rocket League and the game I'm about to talk about. So the interest is there for Rocket League to become affiliated with the Olympics in some regard. As an official Olympic event, it'd be great. Esports, and then you have different categories of esports. Rocket League will be a perfect representative, as would the other representative from the Intel World Open, my second choice in this list, Street Fighter V. Street Fighter is probably the most famous fighting game of all time. Maybe not so much now, but if we're talking historically, historical significance, Street Fighter is huge. Street Fighter is the Beatles of fighting games. It is the one that started it all. Without Street Fighter 2, we do not have Mortal Kombat. We do not have Tekken. We do not have Virtua Fighter. We do not have those games without Street Fighter 2 leading the charge. So the most recent Street Fighter 4, perhaps in 2024, Street Fighter 5, perhaps in 2024, we're talking about Street Fighter 6, would make a fantastic esport, because these, where Rocket League is like a 2-on-2, like a beach volleyball vibe, you know what I mean? And that kind of competition where you have like duos or trios, it's not so much like a full team of people. Fighting games are one person. There's one person holding that controller, representing their country, just like in a wrestling match or a fencing match or something like that. There are enough characters and variety. The Capcom Cup and the Street Fighter League, or Capcom Pro Tour, and the Street Fighter League are still humongous. Street Fighter V is about to get a huge update on Tuesday. So the game is still current. Capcom is still supporting it. I think Street Fighter V would be perfect for the Olympics, or 6 by the time we get there in 2024. I think Street Fighter is the best fighting game representative, not just because of its history, but because it is the easiest one to make, appropriate. Now, I'm not saying that, I'm not talking about blood and guts and gore like Mortal Kombat. Obviously, that wouldn't fly in an Olympic setting for people who don't want shooting games in their Olympics. So I had to choose all non-shooting games, by the way. I'm talking about how, some of the character designs in Street Fighter V or in other fighting games are suggestive, let's say. And there are enough costumes in Street Fighter V that you can basically do what ESPN did with EVO 2017 and mandate that the costumes chosen are appropriate. Not that hard to do. They're all there. In fact, for the Olympics, if Capcom were to make special country-specific outfits so that the person playing the character could wear that country's uniform on their character as well, that would be entirely possible. So, for example, an American player using a character with the an American uniform on, or a Brazilian player using a character with the Brazilian colors. Not necessarily like Ryu is from Japan, he'd be wearing American colors. I understand that's weird, but that would be a way around that. So I think Street Fighter is the most historically significant fighting game that there is, and the ability to give the characters costumes so that parents and other people who are a little gun shy about esports at Olympics don't have something extra to complain about might be worth looking into. My next choice is League of Legends, because League of Legends is the biggest esport in the entire world, and that would be like leaving out soccer. I do know that there are some obstacles to clear with League of Legends, specifically in its match time. They would have to run multiple matches at once. They would have to forego the current LCS or LEC format of one match at a time. The reason for that being that matches in League of Legends are about 45 to 50 minutes long on average. And if you have a 16 country tournament or a 32 country tournament where you're only doing one match at a time, that's going to take you far longer than the 2 to 3 weeks that the Olympics allows. So I would suggest there having one arena with multiple setups. The teams play all of their matches concurrently, make them best of one double elimination, have a section for winner's side, have a section for loser's side, and then play them all. If it takes the entire 3 weeks and it's one of the final tournaments to complete to get your gold, silver, and bronze, that's just how it happens. But I think League of Legends would work very well in an Olympic setting. If they don't want to use League of Legends, if they would prefer that genre, but something a little more quick, a little more fast-paced, a little more flashy, then we're talking about the newest MOBA on the block, my fourth choice for this list, Pokemon Unite. Pokemon Unite is basically the League of Legends MOBA format, but with Pokemon and condensed in such a way that anybody can really get into it. There are issues with the game, specifically in its microtransactions, but that would not be affected, or that would not affect the Olympic competition, because these are all the people who are already the best in the world of the game. They make teams, they've played with each other, they know what they're doing. So Pokemon Unite, being brand new, still has some kinks to work out, but by 2024, if it's a huge property, a huge MOBA game, a huge competition with a huge competitive scene that's still going, you get together 16 teams from 16 different countries, you could absolutely have a tournament. And those matches are only 10 minutes. Standard Pokemon Unite matches are only 10 minutes long. So that is plenty of time. You could have one match at a time in that situation and not have to worry about it. Because 10-minute matches, 16 teams means there's 8 matches in the first round. 80 minutes, first round's done. Make a double elimination, go from there. You could have the entire tournament done in a week. That's perfect. It makes perfect sense. And it's Pokemon, the biggest franchise in the entire world. If you don't think the Pokemon Company, if you don't think Tencent and Timmy, the Chinese developer that made the game, and Nintendo would not want a Pokemon game as part of an Olympic event in esports, you're insane. Of course they would want that. Pokemon Unite makes perfect sense should it grow to a level where it could be considered a qualified esport in 4 years' time. My last entry in this list is kind of cheating. It's not a game specifically. It's more like a like a genre or a niche in the gaming industry. And I feel like the more I thought about this when I was putting this list together, the more it makes the most sense as far as something that could be done in an Olympic setting that would appeal to a super broad audience of people. And that is speedrunning. Speedrunning retro games from the original Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, PlayStation, what have you. Picking different speedrunning events and running races like they do at Games Done Quick marathons, Summer Games Done Quick, Awesome Games Done Quick, where you have 3 or 4 people racing in one game as like a heat, and then you get all the speedrunners are playing the same game, they're all from the same community, and you get one speedrunning champion, or you try to have some sort of a megathon thing where you have a bunch of different games and a bunch of different challenges where a person who does the best wins the gold. However you want to organize that. But speedrunning, I think, makes a lot of sense in an Olympic. It's the same sort of mindset that you would give like track and field events or things of that nature, only, on a much bigger scale, because track and field events are shorter than someone who's trying to speed run through the entirety of Super Mario Brothers in 20 minutes time. It's an interesting concept, bringing speed running to the Olympics. You have to think of games that are good for racing. Like I'm thinking of like Mega Man games, Mega Man 2, Mega Man 3, Mega Man X. I'm thinking of Super Mario games, obviously. We could get into, some 3D platformers of the day if we had enough time to allot like an hour or something like that to it. The only problem with that is then like you'd have to switch the speed run esport every single Olympics, because just having Mega Man X speedrunning is no good. Just having Super Mario speedrunning is so good. The whole point of bringing speedrunning to esports would be to show off a bunch of different games that are being speedrun. Now, could you then turn it into a judging-based event where you get prominent speedrunners not to compete but to be judges, and you have players show off specific speedrunning tech or speedrunning runs, and then they're rated on difficulty, style, that sort of thing? Maybe. That might be something you could think about. But regardless, as I've mentioned here, from multiple different angles, speedrunning in the Olympics could make a lot of sense. Just something to noodle while you're thinking about what kind of games, competitive games, could be an esport in the future. I think that there's definitely a future for that. I think there's definitely a possibility of it being a thing that the future Olympics could do. And best of all, I know I kept saying 4 years' time, 4 years' time, 4 years' time, but video games are not affected by the weather. So if you wanted to have different esports every 2 years, you could absolutely do that. Esports can be played in the winter. Esports can be played in the summer and spring and fall. So if the Olympics wanted to have their first ever 2-year event, or at least off the top of my head, their first 2-year event, esports could fill that gap. Not to mention they could bring in a much younger demographic of people to watch the Olympics, but that's a whole nother story. But yes, give me esports in the Olympics. Give it to me now. I would really, really, really like watching that. Thank you. And with that, we are at the end of episode 58 of the Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast, presented by Fox PHL The Gambler, 102.5 FM, 1480 AM, and iHeart Radio. My name is Jason Fanelli, and as always, I very much appreciate you listening to my show, giving it the time to listen to me rant and rave and holler and all that stuff about things in video games that are making me happy, sad, angry, and everything in between. Dealt with a heavy topic this week. It's not something we normally do, but I feel like this is one that cannot be ignored for obvious reasons. If you heard the segment, if you're listening to my voice now, that means you heard the segment, and hopefully you have learned something from it and you want to try and help these people get through this awful thing that's happened to them. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your downloads, whether you're on Spotify or on iHeartRadio or Apple Podcasts. Thank you for listening to the radio at 4 o'clock on Saturday. If my voice is hitting your ears right now, I cannot thank you enough for your support in these 58 episodes. There are some things brewing in the background that I'm very excited about that could take this show to new heights, and I need you to be here with me. So thank you for your support. Thank you for your time. And thank you for your attention. This has been episode 58 of the Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast. I hope you all have a great weekend and a great week following it. Until next time for 59, my name is Jason Fanelli, and I am signing off. Have a great week. Until next time, see ya.